Hello, and welcome back to the Gen Z Faith Summit. I'm Matt, and I'm here with...
My name is Chris.
And we are joined today by Dr. Kathy Koch. She is a writer, researcher, and speaker who is prolific. She's had over 100 speaking events. Did I say that right? 100 speaking topics, probably about 50 events last year.
Okay, which 50 events, 52 weeks in a year, that's pretty insane. But so she's a powerhouse in the research world and in the technology world and understands teens better than most people we've come across here at Access. She was just featured in a documentary called Connect with Kirk Cameron. And she got a couple books under her belt too. Screens and Teens is one of our favorites. So we're super glad that she's joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me back to Access. I love what you stand for, what you do, and it's an honor to be able to, bless people in the convenience of their home and offices. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Koch. So first question for you. This is the Gen Z Faith Summit. Faith is a driving theme of the discussions that we are going for this round. And one weird thing is that faith and technology don't seem to be very connected, at least at first. But our first question is on that theme. How does faith relate to technology when parenting Generation Z?
Yeah, it's so good to think about that, isn't it? There are some good possibilities. Kids can research quickly online and find Bible verses, find commentaries, find Greek and Hebrew definitions, even though they don't speak the language. The disadvantage is that they can also run across very false theology and false teachings about other gods. So, of course, that's why we need to monitor, and I would rather have parents research with them and be looking over their shoulders, if not, sitting right next to them and, doing the same computer search, if you will. I think we can have alternative perspectives that can drive us to the love of God. Like we see that there's false over here, and that's never going to work. So therefore, I'm going to dig in and understand that God's love is what compels him. My love for others should compel me, those kinds of things. And then there's that whole idea, right, that let me say this. I think our faith grows when we're challenged. What about you guys? The Bible teaches that, right, in those what I call valley experiences, we either run from God if there's an immaturity and we're not grounded, or we discover God in the midst of our challenges, in the midst of heartache, in the midst of disappointment and grief. We dig in and God reveals himself to us, and God meets our needs in just the ways that only the God of the Bible can. And I'm concerned about this Gen Z because I think a lot of them run from challenges. They're so desperate to stay victorious. They can win every game. They want to stay happy. They want everything to be easy. And so they may not have deep-rooted faith. And that's why maybe the dropout rate from faith and the dropout rate from church is what it is. This is why parents have to parent with more than technology. And we have to make sure that our kids know how to, play a board game and lose and not, crumble under the weight of that, et cetera, et cetera. So that'd be my first response to that.
That's great. It seems like a lot of times with the technology discussion, there is friction between teens and parents. Can you shed some light on why there's always a gap there? Is it a generational difference? What's the friction?
Yeah, that's great. Some of it is generational. Our brains, those of us who are older, our brains were finished before we began to use technology. So our default is patience. Younger people's default will be impatience because their brain is wired by the quick speed, the constant change, the pings, dings, and vibrations and visual imagery. So there is actually a generation gap. I think grandparents, parents, and kids may have some real disconnect over the fact that their brain is developed differently. So this is why I say at Celebrate Kids, it's not your fault, you're different, but grow up, and it's not your fault, but it's not an excuse. So I just spoke to a group of kids yesterday here in Atlanta, and they understood that their default is impatience. They admit that they hate to wait. They want everything to be about them and those kinds of things. So I say, look, these are reasons, but if you're a Christ follower, follow Christ and admit sin and admit that you need to get back to the narrow path of righteousness and you want to honor your parents included in that. So I think that's a factor. I think another thing for parents to think about is that many of us use, like my phone. Come on, I like it. Like I'm pro technology. This is an amazing possibility, but it's a tool. It's not a toy. For a lot of young people, devices are their toys. And so they don't necessarily use them with the same intentionality or purpose as we do. And that's why they may want to use it more than, like, I'm able to put mine aside and wait for it to vibrate telling me there's an incoming message. Other kids are like, it's my gold brick bar. It's my everything. No, really, it's not.
Well, that's a good point. Those kinds of differences make a lot of sense, but you're also an exception to the rule in that this is what you do for a living. This is what you study on. This is how you make your living, is studying this and helping other people to understand it. What do you see? Do you see any similarities between some parents today, now that I'm seeing some of that trend for parents to be using devices more as toys than just for tools as well? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, very, very, very good point, Chris. Certainly, there are those parents who I think are escaping their own depression and falling into their device as much as kids do. Moms who are guilty of social media screening or scrolling. Moms who are legitimately on Pinterest, as an example, to get a recipe for a Valentine's party or for an Easter event that they're going to have, totally legit. But then 45 minutes later, they admit, I'm still pinning recipes and I'm still looking at the way that they decorate for Easter. And then dads who can be guilty of gaming and guilty of, online research and hanging out at a bank website way too long while their kids are awake when they could have done that when their kids are in bed. So whether it's a tool use or a toy use, we're addicted. The dopamine drip up there, like there's the ping and the ding, and I can keep winning if I play. So do we live in the living room? Do we make eye contact? Do we know our kids, and do we celebrate what's going on in their lives and choose to, again, put it aside? I want parents listening to recognize that, again, it's not your fault if you have fallen into your screen and you admit that you're not using your time all that well. There are reasons for that, but we need to step back and put it away and love our kids and love our spouses and spend time with them face to face.
So if somebody's watching this and that just hit them right there and they say, oh man, I do that. Is there any way they can just start to take some steps today, this week, tonight to fight their own sort of slavery to these devices in order to model it to their kids?
Oh, so good. Slavery. Oh.
Is that too strong a word?
No, sir. It is for some people. And we don't want anyone to own what isn't theirs. And I want to encourage parents to think first about themselves and not the spouse not watching, or not the best friend or not the kid, because really we are supposed to be role models. Well, we are role models. What are we modeling? So we need to first of all admit that addiction is real, and we're not immune to that, even if we're Christ followers. So putting the device in a whole nother room, when we're having conversations with our kids, when we're helping with homework, when we're watching a show together, when we're whatever we're doing, to have the device in a whole nother room so that we don't hear the vibration, the ping and the ding and wonder if that was our device. And then we know we're not fully present anymore. Mm-hmm. And I want us to pray, that Father God, equip me, empower me, and delight for me to be fully present, and help me to not be distracted, because our attention span is shrinking as well if we allow it to be shrunk by the device. So again, who are we following? So let's admit it. Let's pray. Let's ask for accountability. Let's look at our role models. And one of the things I love to say to parents is admit to your kids that you're struggling too. Let's use the pronoun we. We need to make some changes here. That kids love it when we admit that. Kids admit to me that they wish all their parents would turn off their devices. And I say that to parents, and parents are kind of like stunned. Kids know that the phone's in your back pocket. They know the phone's on your belt. They watch your eyes get diverted from a conversation with them when you felt that vibration. And then the kids just told me just yesterday, Dr. Kathy, I don't know when to start a conversation with my parents. Because it's going to take a while for them to understand, and I'm so afraid I'm going to get started and we're going to be in the mood, and then and so I don't know if that answers your question. That's where my brain went. We need to pray that we would want more of the face-to-face physical contact, emotional wellness in our family.
I really appreciate that. Reminder to adults to be first responsible with the way that we are interacting with our own devices. Interacting with books by Sherry Turkle and other people who have mentioned that even having this thing out on the table, even if it's silent,
yes,
even if it's face down, is a reminder that, we're not alone. Mm-hmm. And it makes conversation just enough shallower because you're expecting some sort of interruption. Your brain is thinking, okay, this is not the world that I'm in right now. I'm only a little piece in this much bigger world that my parent is a part of. I'm not here alone with them. It's going to be distracted from them. So in the same way that we call this next generation, the digital generation, it's almost like those kinds of habits are really informing parents and how they're interacting. So what if we went to the other extreme? If this is the digital generation, what if we were to overreact and raise them not in a digital world at all, i.e. total sheltering? What do you think would happen if we went to that extreme?
Wow. The first thing I'll mention is they may not relate well to their own generation, because others in their generation are using screens and they're using them for academic research. Some of them are using them as textbooks, which I'm not a fan of, but that's what's happening in a lot of our schools. You know, they are gaming, they are connecting with people around the world. They're watching soccer stars and listening to bands from, you know, Northern Ireland. And so they're being exposed to a whole lot. So kids without any of that will have a brain that's different, and their own peer group relationships may struggle, including dating and even marriage if they marry somebody from their generation. And then they'll feel like outcasts. They might go to even a youth meeting and not understand that there was an event that occurred because they weren't on a device to allow them to see that. So I don't envy parents trying to figure out, you know, what's the balance. A little bit is better than a whole lot, and a little bit is really better than none at all. And if they see parents still using devices for work-related causes or to connect with family members from out of town, if they see that we're still on our devices and we say no, nothing at all, they're going to be, you know, angry, bitter, and probably disconnected from parents. But I don't want anyone to misinterpret what I'm saying. Parents still are the ones who get to decide at what age their kids get their devices. And so I am not saying that at age 10 a kid needs a phone. No 10-year-old needs a phone. They might want a phone, and that's a very big difference. You have a 14-year-old who doesn't have a phone, that's totally legit. Maybe you have an old phone that has 911, mom and dad's cell phone, and your daughter borrows that when going to babysit at a home without a landline. But that's a family phone, right? So again, I'm rambling a little bit, but I don't want them to totally disconnect their kids. At the same time, I want them to have permission to say yes or no, go according to need and not want. And that's why when I'm asked by a parent in an audience, you know, at what age do I give my kid a phone? My answer is it always depends upon the need. And that frustrates people, but that's the answer. Would you guys agree with that from what you're hearing and finding?
Yeah, I think so. You used the phrase family phone too, and that seems to be an important distinction. Why is that important that, hey, this is a family phone instead of your phone, Johnny, or something like that?
Yeah, you know, I think, Matt, that even if a parent allows a teenager to have a phone, if the parent is paying the bill, it is still the parent's phone. So even if that kid gets to have it 7 days a week at school, you know, at soccer practice, etc., ultimately it's dad's phone. Let's teach kids that. And that gives the dad permission to say, I need that back for 48 hours. It's my phone. Give me back my phone. But the family phone concept is for, I know of friends who are really doing that with their kiddos. And they're saying, look, you know, we're going to have two phones, and they're flip phones. There's no internet. They don't need Facebook and internet and Instagram on a phone. That's a want. And then it's a convenience factor. It's a safety factor. So let's raise our kids to understand that always being connected isn't necessary, but being able to quickly connect is valuable, right? There's a difference there. So it's a safety factor. And you have one or two, you keep them on a charging station, kids sign them out maybe or ask permission. Dad, tonight when I go over to Billy's, could I have the phone in case I need you to pick me up early because I'm not having a good time and I don't want to awkwardly have to ask Billy's mom? Then dad and mom get to decide, hey, that's a fair use. That's a great idea. It's fully charged. Go ahead and take it.
Yeah, I do remember times as a kid where it was very awkward when I was at a friend's house and they were watching a movie and I was like, I know this movie's more mature than my parents want me to watch, so I should call them and ask them. That was our rule.
Yes.
I had to say, it's my parents' rule. I have to call them and ask them. But that was so incredibly uncomfortable to ask to borrow a phone to do that. So if the kid had the phone, that might make it a lot easier to kind of have that open line of communication. That's a great idea.
Good.
Is there a way, or a few ways probably, that parents can use the phone that the kid has to connect with them, to build more of a relationship with them via that technology? This is after they've got access to it, of course.
Yes, and that's a great question. I would love for parents and kids to sit down and discuss that. You know, what are some fun, appropriate uses of the phone? How could we use it to be a blessing to each other? I know that a lot of preteens and teens really resent it if they text mom and mom calls them back, right? Yeah, because mom's like, oh, she's at her phone. Now I can call her. Well, that's the text from a kid is not an invitation to call them.
Mhm.
The text from a kid is an invitation to text back. So I think that's just what kids tell me all the time. And that again, but have that discussion and say to your son or daughter, if I know that it's longer than a text answer, and I call, would you please answer? Or text and say, hey, call in 10 if you have to. In other words, this wouldn't be a great time, but I'll carve out a few minutes in 10 minutes. So I think that's a policy that we discuss, that we relate to. I think there are times moms and dads text kids and don't necessarily want them to call back. How many of us text quickly in the middle of a meeting or text quickly while a friend at a restaurant is also on her phone, but we really don't want our daughter to call back because, shoot, I'm having lunch with a friend and I want to honor that relationship. And then there are some games. Let's admit there are some apps. I know of family members who play simple games like Words with Friends, and they compete, mom and daughter and grandmother and grandson. And they have that every day. They look for the game and they build the score. And I wouldn't want that to be the only communication for obvious reasons, but I think it can give you something to talk about. I know, for example, my family is very sports-minded. We are Green Bay Packer fans. We are Big Ten, Wisconsin, and Purdue fans, and I say that without apology. And we will have group texts during games. We will have, have you noticed the latest, quote from the coach? And that this is with my nieces, nephew, brother, his wife, some of my sister-in-law's family, and we live in very various states. And that's a great way to connect and have something to talk about online and then something to talk about when we are face-to-face.
Yeah. I like that you just mentioned grandparents. I don't think we've brought them into this yet. Words with Friends seems like a really great way to kind of have that interaction between a 12-year-old and a grandparent. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other ways that you've seen families bridge that gap between like multiple generations?
Yes. Thanks for asking. If I could say first, grandparents tell me all the time they're desperate to figure it out. I just did a conference in Omaha, Nebraska, and praise God, this church recruited for attendees multi-generations. So we had everything with a preteen to an 84-year-old grandmother there, great-grandmother actually, wanting to understand why when my grandkids and great-grandkids come over, are they always on their phone? And they want to know, and they feel unloved and they feel unimportant. So these are conversations for parents to have with kids and grandparents to have with kids about how we feel and why could we draw that barrier for a while. It won't kill you to put your phone away for 2 or 3 hours. So let's have that conversation and let's educate grandparents about why kids want to be on devices. It is the adrenaline drip. It's the addiction. It is their everything. It's like my dad's jackknife. My dad never went anywhere without a knife in his pocket. It was his knife, his corkscrew, his nail file, his screwdriver, right? Whatever. The phone is our clock, our alarm clock, our dictionary, our friend list, it's our address book, it's our everything. And grandparents don't get that. So part of what I want to say to help the generational dynamic is to have a conversation that's educational, that doesn't come across as obnoxious persuasion, but just an information share. So grandparents get it more and they resist less. One of the best things I've seen families do is plan vacations together, where maybe you and your kids are going to go visit grandma and grandpa over spring break or next summer. And what are the museums in the area? What are the fun parks in the area? What are the hole-in-the-wall restaurants that we should go to because we're searching for the best cheeseburger in America? And, mom, dad, and junior, they do that in their home. And then they send links to grandma and grandpa, down in Florida. And they say, hey, look at this. Have you ever been there? That's honoring to the children and honoring to the grandparents as well. So family planning, certainly research. I think, seriously, you guys, come on, Google and YouTube University, if you will, and TED Talks, and even our website, your website, tons of great information there when we're searching for school topic, research reports, or again, information. Maybe you see a statistic in your community about drug and alcohol use, and you want to know what's going on nationwide. Come to access.org and get some data and get some really good help. I think that would be fabulous.
That is fabulous. Thanks for the plug.
Sure.
So you said grandparents are just hungry to understand why their kids won't get off the phone. And you've talked about how kids want their parents to get off their phone, but for some reason, when we ask them to give it up, sometimes it just seems like life or death.
Mm-hmm.
They cling to it. What is it about that little device that lives in their pocket that makes them want to cling to it so much? I'm sure it's a myriad of things, but can we dig into that for just a minute?
Wow. So yes, I've mentioned the addiction factor, and it's really true. And you probably have other guests that are even better at explaining that than I am. Certainly, there's an adrenaline drop, and it's very similar to a cocaine addiction, what it does to the brain, and even what it does to the heart. And so we have to understand, again, there's a reason it's hard, but not an excuse to be sinful toward people in the room. And that's what I say to teenagers all the time. I have compassion for you. I get it. But come on, are you following Twitter or following Christ? Where's your allegiance here? And I've had teenagers clap, because it's not about me. It's about somebody has had the guts to say, this is why it's hard for you. And I think they appreciate that I honor that it's hard for them. And I respect that there's an addiction factor. Actually, many of them are addicted to having their hands busy. You guys are both young. You've grown up in this generation. Am I right that your hands are often busy? You've either got a phone, you've got a mouse, you've got a game device. There's something. So there's even an addiction there. I give kids fiddlers, pipe cleaners and koosh balls and stress balls, so that their hands are being busy with something. And then the other thing, in reality, they collect people. People are their commodity. Many of them know how many Instagram followers they have and how many they've gotten in the last 24 hours. I don't know about you guys, but I don't know. I know I'm followed, and I'm grateful for people who care about what I think and say. What?
And you're running a business based off this sort of stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and I hire someone to pay better attention than me. But it's tempting, but I don't need to know. And the other thing that's so sad, and you guys know this, is the young people who have a need to connect without a good skill set to connect through, right? Because of texting and social media and the really parent absence, could I just be honest? Parents need to be fully available, emotionally available, physically available, socially available, spiritually available for the heart cry. But kids tell me my mom and dad are distracted all the time. And I don't say this lightly. I respect greatly parents trying to do it well. I respect that many of you are busy for legitimate reasons. Yet the kids and the teens and the preteens are telling me, again, they're distracted. And so we're not in the room present. We're not doing the eye contact, facial feedback. We're not helping them understand how to read body language. So they're intimidated by it all, because we're allowing them to be raised first with a message on a device that has no eye contact, facial feedback, tone of voice attached to it. And so they're best here, right? Their skill set, they're best here. I respect that. If you are upset about it, model for them and teach them the skill set they need so that they can find a friend, relate. I have kids tell me, Dr. Kathy, my dad was right. I began a relationship with a kid I never should have. Now I don't know what to do. How do I get rid of this kid without hurting the kid? So do we help them with that? Those are legitimate issues. It's complicated today.
It is. And I appreciate some of the things that you're mentioning on how social media use, how phone use, how technology in general is affecting our kids' interactions with each other. I want to hear a little bit more about that. Could you tell me more about how social media, how technology use influences the way that teens today are actually experiencing their own lives?
Wow, seriously. In a vacuum, right? Some of them isolate, and I use the phrase fall into their screen. They're lonely, so they go to their screen, which increases loneliness. It's a sad thing. And I've met many moms in particular who admit that to me as well. Having a bad day, I'm going to go to social media rather than to God in prayer, a best friend for prayer and conversation and accountability. I get it. It's not the healthiest way to go. Other things that come to mind would be the quick pace. I think the impatience of the younger generation, because everything's new and now and about them and quick and easy, and problems are quickly solved. You can ask Siri a question on a phone and get an answer. Now, oh my goodness, she's often wrong, and I wish our young people understood that. But she is there and she's available, which is why we have to be available. Because if we're not, they will turn to Siri and Google and even social media friends and connections they have, rather than the authority of a mom and a dad and a pastor and a teacher and an adult sibling, perhaps. And even you can kind of joke about the 144 character concept that began with Twitter. I think they're short. I think they don't use lots of rich language to unpack ideas. And then parents assume rather than asking, because kids don't like the interrogation. But I say to young people, again, you're responsible. If you don't give me enough information to know how to respond and help you, I'm going to have to ask you questions. If you resent that, then help me out with richer, unpacked language with greater detail. And then the other thing I've noticed that I'm sure you guys are aware of as well would be the lack of vulnerability and authenticity, or sometimes a cry for help in a text or a social media post, and we wonder, is that a lyric of a CD, right? Or is that a true cry for help? And kids are flippant with some of that. I'm actually back to the faith question that you guys are so interested in at Access. I'm concerned about young people today who don't know how to be vulnerable, transparent, and real with moms, dads, siblings, pastors, others. Then will they be able to be vulnerable and real with God? Or are their prayers kind of at that superficial level, or do they say, help me, but there's no unpacking because they're afraid to admit what's really going on in here? That, I think, is all caused by, a cause of all of that would be social media and technology and the phone in general. Christian school teachers tell me that a lot of kids' prayers have become very short and very common, rather than them being able to admit that there is a personal something going on within them or within their family. Like in the old days, we might have been more vulnerable.
Is there any way parents can, if they're aware of that, can kind of draw their child out more into the authentic realm and get them to be a little more honest about what they're struggling with or whatnot, whether using your technology or not?
Oh, I love that last statement, Matt. Yes. Again, what are we role modeling? Do they hear us be vulnerable to a spouse in front of them? Do they hear us to a kid say, man, I'm so sorry. You have a right to your disappointment that I forgot to buy the poster board. I was distracted. It wasn't right. I'm so sorry. So are we vulnerable in owning what is ours to own, or do we dismiss them like it was no big deal when in fact to them it was? Doesn't matter if it's a big deal to us. It matters if it's a big deal to them, because in that moment, it's their heart that's at risk. So are we modeling all that? And then, when a child does share a heart cry, like the highest honor a parent will ever receive is a child who's honest and says, Daddy, I'm angry and I don't know what to do with my anger. Or, Mom, I was lonely all day and no one sat with me and it was just awkward. I just don't feel safe at school. The first thing we say, guys, right then matters greatly. And I'm going to say the first thing we do. Because what I want parents to do is put down whatever's in their hand, walk toward their son or daughter, and hug if that's safe in your relationship, tussle their hair, hand on their shoulder. And I want parents, and thank you for listening to me, I want parents to respond to the emotion before they try to fix the problem. Mm-hmm. One of the best ways to shut down vulnerability, transparency, and authenticity is to treat anyone like a problem you're trying to solve or a project you're trying to finish. So when a child says, I had a bad day, I am so sorry. I bet that was so hard for you. I hate it when I have bad days. And then just wait. Oh, to be quiet is so brave. And see if the kid will expand to give you more information so you now know what to say next. Sometimes to say, oh, loneliness, I hate it when I feel that. It's awkward. I get that. I'm sad for you. Can I help? To offer, can I help? Or because they can say no, but that's okay because maybe the timing isn't right. Maybe they want to process it more. Maybe they want to, get a little bit more understanding of their own emotions before they enter into a conversation with you. Otherwise, I like the question, how can I help? Which indicates, I'm here for you. And, can I just listen? Not every kid needs solutions. They need to be heard. And then if they could figure it out on their own and come back to you and go, Dad, I think I'll do it this way next time. And then you get to affirm, great decision. That's wisdom, son. Way to grow up. And they'll never have a chance to hear you say great wisdom if you solve all their problems for them. So do you understand how that's related? Vulnerability, transparency. So I love that we care. It's a high honor when they admit their concerns. And then we need to wait, respond to emotion before we try to solve the problem.
Yeah. It sounds like the exact opposite of a shallow screen-driven connection is what you're describing right here. And therefore the best way to counter it. It's wonderful.
And thank you for recognizing that. And awkward at first, right? Because it is the exact opposite. So if even the adults have, again, relied upon the screen, how many of us solve our relational problems with the text? Rather than a phone call, I'm so sorry to disappoint you. I can't do lunch tomorrow, I'm overbooked. How many of us text that? Because it's easier to hear than to hear the disappointment of our friend on the other side, right? So yeah, we're not good at it anymore. They're not good at it anymore. It's awkward because it's different. So we need to hang in there. And the more that we do it, as we honor the people we love, the more we do it, the easier it gets and the more natural that response will become.
Yeah. And is there a place for those quick text responses where you say, hey, I can't meet today. Sorry, talk later?
Yes. Oh, I love the talk later. Yes, absolutely. I scheduled something just this morning, a phone call with somebody who we're trying to connect and get to know each other better related to ministry involvement. And we scheduled all that with texting because we're busy, we're on different coasts, and yes, and even with a kid, absolutely. I love the talk later. I love that you would follow up later. Respect the time of day, respect scheduling, absolutely. What I don't want is for anyone in the family to think that that's the only way. That's when we begin to, we're divorcing each other in our mind. We're creating what I would, right? We're divorcing each other in our mind. Does that make sense? There's almost what I call emotional suicide because we're not willing to feel anymore. That's really, if you're texting because of that, I would encourage you to acknowledge it, forgive self and others if that's appropriate, pray, and maybe even get some help and find out why are you so resistant to the interaction that we're having even on screen today.
Mm-hmm. Man, well, Kathy, thank you so much. Is there any final advice you have for people who are saying, wow, this is something I have a problem with, or this is something my whole family has a problem with, or just maybe I'm doing okay, but I want to do better?
Well, yeah, thanks. I love that. So don't own anything that isn't yours, so praise God if you're in a pretty good space here. Have the humility to dig in, maybe watch this again, maybe watch it with your teens and let us bring up the stuff and kind of be the heavies that project ideas that then the family can discuss. I think that's a great use of the Teen Parent Summit. I think acknowledging the good and the not so good is great. Using words like need versus want, using pronouns like we will make some changes here versus you need to make some changes here. I think that's a really good bit of advice to leave people with. And let's remind everybody, technology is great. Right? The evil here isn't the device. Satan would love to destroy families. He would love to destroy the family unit. And I think in this season, Satan's using technology to really distract and destroy and to create barriers rather than to bring people together. And so let's acknowledge that and be really careful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and any resources for people who want to really fight that, like you were just talking about too.
Yeah, well, certainly, again, access.org, praise God, they found you. My book, I certainly would recommend Screens and Teens, if I can be so bold as to do so.
Please do it.
It's practical, it's readable, it's encouraging. All my books I write are designed to offer hope as well as compelling reasons to change. You will see the good here and you'll see the things that you can do to change. And then we do have, my blog has many posts related to, relationships and technology and just family and school and church dynamics. So they can find that at my name, Dr. Kathy Koch, KathyKoch.com. So thanks, guys. I've loved being a part of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we'll back you up. Screens and Teens is one of our favorites, too.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you later.
Excellent. Look forward to it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.